We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Haley Dorsey. She is the People Business Partner at LeanIX. Haley, so good to see you. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Great to meet you, Christina. Happy to be here on the podcast. So my pronouns are she, her, and hers also. I remember exactly how I answered the question, how I want to be, what I want to be when I grow up. I actually used to tell people that I want to race lawnmowers professionally because I actually didn't have a good answer to what I wanted to be when I grew up. I never knew. I had a ton of interest, but I wanted to have an answer. So that was sort of my go-to, but not actually what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a lot of different things, but I knew I wanted to be the boss. Like I wanted to be in charge of whatever it was that I was doing overall.
I love that. I could honestly say nobody has given that answer before when I asked.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You fast forward to today. I know that, from your bio and kind of working at LeanIX, you joined when the team was around, I think, 200 globally and really 10 locally. And you've grown to about 450 globally and 100 locally. So a lot of growth there. Do you think it's ever too early to bring in a people leader, or is it a myth that you need? I know some people say X number of employees, 100 employees to hire someone in the people, HR, talent space.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a myth for sure. I think the people leader has to be one of your first hires. Your company depends on its people. There's no way you can achieve company goals without a team, without individuals that are bought into your mission. And the way to get, to buy people into your mission and really dedicate, their working lives to what your company is doing is to have a strong people leader that drives that mission, I think. Without a people leader, you run into a lot of obstacles along the way. You start to do a lot of things, put some things in place without really thinking of things, whether it's, like tactical and logistical things like payroll taxes in different states or submitting year-end reports, to the more strategic things like you have somebody in this role and you hire them and then all of a sudden they're in the same role and it's 2 years later, but you don't really have a career path lined out. You don't really know what to do with this person, but you don't want to lose them, but you don't have a people strategy. So I think those things, come up pretty quickly as a team is building out and scaling out. And you need a people leader to really drive those things.
Absolutely. It's a full-time job. And also, I definitely agree with you that people are your greatest assets. They're the ones working with your customers, creating that company culture. And you need to be proactive about that as well. I know I mentioned in terms of the numbers, the intentional growth that LeanIX has seen as well. And it's in the name of the interview series. So I want to ask about company culture. How do you think about measuring company culture both in a qualitative and quantitative way, especially as the team continues to grow?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the qualitative side, at LeanIX, something that we are really into is using our ENPS survey. So every quarter we send out an ENPS survey or an employee net promoter survey, and we have our employee engagement score or our employee net promoter score. Amongst other metrics and factors that we can get from those, we really have like the overall, how are people feeling about the company? Would they recommend the company as a great place to work? Do they see themselves working here in 2 years' time? Those types of questions all go into that ENPS score. So we really look at that every quarter on the quantitative front. Also, things like retention rate, employee referral rate, turnover rates, all those different metrics that we can look at to see, are people happy with the company? Are they staying with us? Are they growing with us? Are they letting their friends and their networks know about us? Those types of things on the quantitative side. On the qualitative side, it's interesting. I don't think there's a really set way to measure the culture, but there's different things that we can look at. For example, the environment that we're in, even though we're flexible and we work in this sort of connected remote type of environment, we do have 5 physical offices located, throughout the world. We make sure that our office spaces are, sort of open and collaborative, and, that people sort of feed off that environment when they're in the office space, if they're able to, sort of openly approach somebody at their desk, or even then, or break out into a meeting room to have a more private conversation that's readily available for them. That really sort of boosts the collaboration and the interaction that people get with their teams. I think if our environment sets it up like that. So that's one thing. Other things are leadership. I'm a big believer that a company culture is really influenced from the top down. So if you have leaders that are available and present and transparent and sort of willing and able to converse with people at all levels, that interaction and that transparency also sort of trickles down through the rest of the organization and throughout the culture. Social responsibility too. A lot of employees these days, that's really on the forefront of their minds. They're looking for organizations and an organizational culture that aligns with the values that they have, in their own personal lives. So I think good, responsible companies attract good, responsible people to come work for them, and that really influences their culture too. So there's so many different things that make up the company culture, and a lot of that happens organically. But those are some of the things that come to mind.
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely make sense in terms of having different levers and metrics to see how are people feeling, how are they experiencing the culture, whether it's the office, that modeling behavior from the leadership team, social responsibility. So it's not just one metric as well. And you mentioned flexibility and the role of the office. We know that there are some studies that say the adoption of this radical flexibility raises the number of employees defined as high performing by 40%. What role does radical flexibility play in your company culture at LeanIX?
Yeah. I think for like a lot of other companies, I think radical flexibility really became a thing for LeanIX during and in the midst of and after the COVID pandemic. So before that, we were very largely an office first company. We definitely had flexibility, to work remotely or work from home sort of here and there, as people needed it, but we weren't hiring people that weren't in, like a daily commutable distance to an office. And then, come March 2020, that really shifted for us with, we didn't have a choice, but we very quickly realized that, people can and will be successful if you give them the tools and the support that that they need to be successful. So that has been huge for us. So we've since transitioned to this sort of connected remote style working throughout the company. For us, that means it's really up to the individuals and the teams together to decide how they'll work, both with themselves and with the rest of the company. So we have some teams that are in the offices once a week or twice a week. Some people who live further away that'll visit 1 week out of a month, whatever that may look like. It's sort of up to them. And then each office location will host a monthly event and sort of quarterly business reviews that people are invited and able to travel to those offices for, but it's not required either. So they have the flexibility when and how they attend these in-person events. But this has been good for us. I think this style of working, it really allows people and teams to determine what's best for them, what's best for their own schedules, their project deadlines, and ultimately this has given our employees this greater feeling of autonomy. Right, we hire people that we trust to do their jobs and to get their jobs done, and allowing everyone to work in this connected remote fashion really emphasizes that trust, which people really appreciate.
Absolutely. People want that autonomy. They want to feel like their employer and also their team, their manager really trusts them to do the work as well. And you're right. I hear from a lot of leaders and organizations that radical flexibility came in after the pandemic started as well. I want to ask too, in terms of scaling, how are you really thinking about continuing to personalize what you were talking about as well, with folks coming in at different times and really being up to the team as well, to personalize that employee experience, knowing that people are at different points of their lives and careers as well at LeanIX?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So, we're certainly scaling very quickly. We have been for the last several years. There's really no signs of slowing down there. And, we're not just in scaling in terms of employee count, but also in terms of, putting in new teams and new departments, new leaders, new positions that we haven't had before. So really sort of scaling the strategy of the business as well. Like, for example, in June, we brought in our first ever CRO. We haven't had a CRO before, just haven't been there as a company. Now that we've grown to a significant point, it makes sense to have somebody in that position. And that's actually our first person on our C-suite to be located in the US, which is great. And aside from that, we've opened several other office locations in the last year, and we've acquired a smaller company as well. So we're really scaling in all these different ways. Whether it's the employee count geographically, the product suite, and leadership. So obviously it's important to know as we're continuing to scale, we need to keep an eye on, the individual employee experience and how we can best continue to personalize that. Again, a company, I think I said before, only operates as well as people are sort of willing and able to work. And, people are willing to work hard if they feel they're getting value from the organization. So one thing that we're doing at LeanIX right now is really looking at our different teams, our different departments, different positions within them, and really defining and refining sort of what positions are needed, what level those positions are at, mapping those levels to different salary bands. And this sort of job leveling salary mapping process is really helping us ensure that everybody we bring onto the LeanIX has a career path and is treated fairly and equitably along the way. So that's something, really big for us, just ensuring that we can, keep people sort of on a path and keep them motivated to what lies ahead and what may be available for them in their future. Aside from that, we've also really recently revamped our onboarding process. So all of our employees, regardless of their position or their job level, they go through a 2-week company and product-based onboarding program. So this has really allowed our employees, despite where they are located or who they are or what work they do within the company, to really feel and build an interaction and a connection with the company, with our products, with our team, with our mission and vision. And we notice that as employees are feeling more connected, as soon as they bring on to what the overall company is doing, it then allows them to take a real personal stake in the job. So trying to, the more people can feel connected to what we do as a company, the more they're sort of motivated personally to be bought into that.
Yeah, I think that is a great example because career mapping is so personal. Everybody has different goals, and kind of understanding what that roadmap is to achieve those goals is really important. That two-way conversation with your manager and to see that framework forth as well. In terms of redefining, I know you mentioned a couple ways in terms of company culture. Have you thought about kind of the changing definition of employee engagement over the past year, and what metrics or what you look to say, okay, is this team member, are these teams engaged in what the organization is doing, especially in a distributed work environment?
Yeah, there's been a big shift for, me personally, and I think within the people team here at LeanIX, how we look at employee engagement. In the past, I used to think of employee engagement as something that was purely on the employee themselves, right? If an employee is paying attention, if they're showing up, if they're present, if they're bought in, I would think, okay, great, they're doing what they need to do to be engaged. But now, I sort of understand, as things are shifting, as different as different things are sort of, coming to light in terms of how people work and how they should work and how a company should treat people, I've realized it's really on the company, how we operate as a company. And largely the people department itself, it's our responsibility to make sure that employees are engaged, provide them an atmosphere and, in a working environment that they're able to engage with. So in the past year, we've really tried to take on this ownership of the employee, the employee engagement experience at LeanIX by looking at, the entire employee life cycle, from our strategy and how we attract and recruit to ultimately how we grow and promote people, and then, eventually exit them from the business one way or the other, and everything that happens in between. And as a people team, we've been really, really intentional about having different teams or different individuals within our own team really owning and sort of continuously developing their part of the employee lifecycle experience. So for me, I work as a people business partner. I own the grow and promote part of the employee lifecycle. So I have my other team members focusing on, compensation and benefits and talent and acquisition and, every part of that lifecycle. But for, everybody knows that the business partner team is dedicated to grow and promote. So to have somebody within the people team, that is really sort of owning that part of the employee life cycle, I think has been super beneficial for us. People see that we're taking an interest in them and their careers, and they really appreciate that.
Yeah, creating an environment where people can thrive and really feel empowered to do their jobs. And I want to talk about that in between time period of the employee experience. We've seen over the past few years that business as usual is out the window. Consistently auditing how we do things is important. Is there a new initiative or program that you've tested over the past few years that you'd like to share with folks who are listening, and what was the result?
Yeah. So the new onboarding process that I talked about a little bit ago, that was one really big thing that we did this year that has been, really, really well received. But aside from that, we put in a few initiatives that we've actually just begun to pilot this summer. So one is the ambassador program. So we have, as I mentioned, we have 5 different offices throughout the world, here in the US, Slovenia, India, Germany, and somewhere else. There's a few of them. And with our ambassador program, each department and each department head is able to nominate a certain number of their employees, depending on the the department size. Each quarter, top performers, then there's sort of a voting and selection process, and those ambassadors can then spend 2 weeks, any 2 weeks of their choosing throughout the year at any of our office locations. So they're able to travel, across the world or wherever they may be, whether it may be across the country, if they're choosing to stay more local, but they're able to act as sort of a local ambassador from another location for that other office. So really looking forward to seeing how that goes. We also have our Young Leader program, which we have just begun piloted as well. At LeanIX, when we're growing and promoting, we have a lot of people becoming leaders or managers for the first time. So now we have this new sort of guided year-long journey offered to newly promoted leaders at LeanIX. They'll learn foundational leadership skills. They go through a mentorship program. They're put in different situations where they're able to establish, strong relationships with the broader leadership team at the company. So really looking forward to seeing, how those programs come in place. And then really excited, one initiative that we have just announced as well. For the first time this year in October, we're going to bring all LeanIX employees to one place at one time. So all 460 of us, regardless of which level you're at, or how often, whether it's part-time people, interns, working students, whatever it may be, people that are out on parental leave, they're all invited to, we're actually going to Sicily in October, which is going to be awesome. So planning this company retreat, hopefully we can make it an annual thing after we pilot it this year for the first time. But that'll be really fun as well. It's supposed to be about 60%, fun and bonding, and we'll spend about 40% of our time working on company objectives. So lots of exciting things in the works for our employees at LeanIX.
There is a lot of exciting things going on, a lot of programs and initiatives to be kind of raise your hand, to be nominated for, to really be a part of as well in terms of the company culture. And you mentioned in terms of the qualitative and quantitative ways you think about measuring company culture, that voice of the employee. Has there ever been a time where you were surprised by employee feedback? And if so, how did that inform the people or talent strategy moving forward, whether it's, in a small or a big way?
Yeah, definitely. I think people surprise me every day, first of all, but surprised by feedback, absolutely. I think there's definitely been times where, I have sort of, in my position, I've had one vision or idea of how, a certain manager works and how their team operates. But then if I talk to, a member of that team and really get the reality is quite far off from what my vision or what my interpretation actually is. So I've learned from these experiences to really, approach my job as a people business partner as one that really connects with people at all levels. Like on paper, my key stakeholders are the department heads and the leaders of the departments. But it's really crucial for me to have a rapport and have a relationship with people at all levels, to really understand, get a holistic view of how the team works together, who's on that team, sort of how all those different pieces sort of work and fit together to come up with the end result. I really like the way we do our feedback at LeanIX. It really puts the employee in charge here, puts the individual contributor sort of in the lead of talking about what their goals are and their realities are and sort of what their options are. And then it gives our employees a chance to give their manager feedback first, sort of on how they can best support them in achieving their individual goals. So it gives our employees a voice and a level of autonomy over their work experience at the company that I think is really important. And that certainly, that way of working has definitely been shaped by, just the feedback I've been given on different employee experiences, right?
Yeah, people surprise me every day as well. I
Absolutely.
resonate with that as well. And I think, it's really important to foster an environment where feedback is welcome and people can give
Of
it on
course.
an ongoing basis too, no matter what part of the employee experience you're in, whether it's day 1, year 5, as well. I would love to ask, so not necessarily internally at LeanIX, but just what you've seen out in the universe and things like that. What are some common mistakes you see folks making in their people strategy?
Yeah, I think, first of all, just waiting too long to have a people strategy in place or never having one at all. I know there's some companies out there where, the people team is just recruiting, they just trying to bring people into the company. And then there's not really anybody else that owns that employee experience. So I think that's a mistake being too black and white also, I think, can certainly be a downfall. As we just talked, people are surprising. You truly never know what's going to come across your plate working in this field, and you sort of have to be willing and able to adjust for whatever it is that's happening. There may not always be a perfect plan or a perfect strategy, but trusting that you have the team and the resources in place to do the best you can in any situation, I think that's super critical. And last, in addition to that, just sort of being stuck in your ways and having a lack of flexibility. I think people's strategy, it really needs to be fluid. It's going to change with new market trends, new people trends, new company goals, whatever it may be. Just because something, worked in the past or was the right thing to do in the past doesn't necessarily mean it's the best solution, to move forward with. So I think the best people leaders are those that are always listening to the people around them and understanding what it is that they want and need, and how the company may be able to help make that happen in a way that's mutually beneficial.
Absolutely. Do not wait, innovate, really listen, be flexible, have a strategy in place. It is never too early to start thinking about it, and
Absolutely.
be creative as well. Haley, is there anything that I didn't ask throughout our conversation that you would like to share, or underscoring any key insights about anything really that we have discussed?
Yeah, no, I think I'm just grateful to have the discussion and have the opportunity that a podcast like this exists. I've been super passionate about culture and people initiatives for such a long time, and I think it's because these conversations are becoming more and more prominent, I think, in the world, which is super interesting. It's interesting. There's definitely a shift happening in every industry. People really used to revolve their lives around their work, and now they're revolving their work around their lives, and that is causing conversations about people and strategy and how we work together, to really become on the forefront of so many people's minds. And I think it's awesome. I think it's the way it should be, and I think it's also it's opening the doors for some exciting career opportunities too. It's not just working in people is not just being the HR manager or the HR admin anymore, but there's exciting roles like working with employee engagement and DEI and just the overall people strategy. I think it's awesome. So I'm just happy to be having the conversations about it.
I am really happy that you were on the show as well, and really appreciate that. This is definitely one of my favorite parts of the job, is just talking to leaders who are doing things differently, and also just really passionate about people, talent, culture as well. Haley, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Christina.
Of course, and as a reminder, folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.